identify that I've not been a great son, and my relationship with my father is nowhere near what I want it to be or it could be. And there's so much work to do around that. There's so much shame and there was so much pain. And my dad had been someone who'd always, worked to build a relationship with me, but I had this feeling or narrative from my mum about my dad.
You kind of woke up and saw like, I can't keep going on like this.
It's been an interesting journey, but men's work is quite unattractive for men. For 90% of guys, the thought of going hugging another guy, being silent, taking yourself away, not drinking, sitting in circles, talking openly, all that sort of stuff, it's repellent.
The real battle just goes on in your mind. That's where the real battle for any man is happening, inside his own mind.
All of a sudden I was like, right, this is my work. This is what I needed to do. I needed to fight my inner enemy.
Welcome to the Authentic Man podcast. I am your host, David Chambers. This is a podcast for men who want more and less from life. More deep connection, more emotional intelligence, more self-awareness, and more great sex. And less heartache, less conflict, less overthinking, and less stress. Creating dating lives, sex lives, and relationships that are incredible and authentic. My deepest goal is that you, the listener, can take away what you hear in this podcast and apply it to your life so that you can experience greater happiness, transformational growth, deeper relationships, and profound sexual intimacy. I believe that as men, we are capable of so much more depth than we are shown or led to believe. So join me as we get deep into this. Welcome back to another episode of the Authentic Man podcast. I'm your host, David Chambers, a men's dating, relationship, and intimacy coach, and I do a lot of men's work and work around masculinity for men. This episode is a topic that I haven't covered in the podcast before, right? Self-sabotage. I'm joined by a wonderful man, Ben Owen, as he really gets into the nitty-gritty of what creates our self-sabotage, how we can notice our self-sabotage, and how we can stop self-sabotaging. It sounds that simple, but really, it's a really deep process that he explains, and we kind of really get into the nitty-gritty of how it affects our lives in multiple aspects, whether that's our dating lives, our relationships, our businesses, and he takes you through his own personal experience. And I talk about a lot of mine with self-sabotage, because one of the really, I won't say dangerous, but one of the really tricky things with self-sabotage is that it's not the big things in life that we sabotage. It's the day-to-day things that cause the long-term big problems in our lives. And we really get into why that is and how we can start to notice that in the episode. And we also talk about something which I found really enjoyable part of the conversation, was actually getting into the what confidence really is, what real confidence is. And it's going to be really surprising to you, right? Because we often think confidence is one thing, and we're all searching for confidence in our lives. And it's one of the most common reasons that men come to work with me is looking for confidence. We get into that. And then we also talk about men's work and what it is and why it's unattractive to men, and what we've got out of men's work actually, because it's been a big part of my journey in the last couple of years of being in men's spaces. But before we get into the episode, just let you know, I've got a couple of spots that are open up for coaching as of now. I work on different lengths of time with people, and I really delve into the similar topics that we talked today, helping people like unblock themselves, whether that's in their general life or in their dating life and relationship, helping them have more self-awareness, gain more confidence, create more connection in their life, and get over some of the kind of chronic issues we have in relationship and intimacy and sex, which is where I've done some really beautiful work with people who are struggling in that area. So if you're interested in that, then, you'll find my email address in the show notes. Just pop me an email and we'll have a conversation and have a chat. But without further ado, I'll let you jump into the episode. Welcome, listeners, back to another wonderful episode. And we're going to tackle a topic which I see a hell of a lot in my coaching, in my work with people. And I see it in my own life. More than anything, I've seen it in my own life. And especially when I look back in my life, I really see it. And we'll talk about self-sabotage. And I got a wonderful guest with me. And through a series of happenstance, he contacted me. And then I was on a retreat with someone. And then they mentioned this person's name. And I was like, well, okay, God's obviously meaning that we sit down and have a conversation. So we connected, and it's been beautiful to connect. We've had a lovely conversation before we start. And I imagine that we'll get deeper into his story and who he is. I'd like to introduce you to Ben Owen. How you doing, Ben?
David, so great to meet you. And I just actually, before we started, I said to David, guys, David has this presence where I just feel like I could tell him anything. He was a born coach. I got on the podcast and I was like, dude, I'm really going to enjoy this. So yeah, thank you for having me on. I'm really grateful, and I'm excited because honestly, the stuff that I'm going to share has been the back end of 15 plus years in personal development as a coach. I've been working on myself for a long time, but I've also been a coach for a long time, and I've helped lots of people transform bodies, brains, businesses, lives, and all sorts. So yeah, I think this is going to be a really great topic.
Awesome. And let's kick off with, what is it that you do now? You mentioned that you're a coach, but also more importantly is like, what was your journey to do the work that you now do today?
Yeah, good question. I am a coach. I'm a coach through and through. I always have been. I started real young. I was an elite athlete from the age of about 13. I was running for my country. I managed to work with some of the best coaches in the UK and on the track. I was a track athlete, and just had really great people, like men, specifically men actually. Like I never even realized that men coaches who were significant people in my life helped me various parts, helping me improve my athletics career. They were a great figurehead in my life, and they were part of how I created discipline and structure in a household where I didn't have a lot of that, a lot of chaos. And when I was around about 18 years old, I was in university, and I started working for a coaching company which coached kids, coached like little kids doing PPA cover. And I walked into the manager's office one day, the owners, and he said, Ben, take your top, lift up your top. And I was like shredded. I was, because I was an athlete, and I was absolutely shredded. And he goes, if you can get me abs like that, I will pay you £500 a month, which was for that part of my, that was like loads of money. And I was like, wow, yeah. So I started in like personal training. I would have done a fair bit of coaching before that, but it's like I started becoming a personal trainer whilst doing my university degree. And yeah, just really, that's where it all started. Started taking my friends for beach training, groups, and did my PGC, masters, all sorts of qualifications. But at the back of all, I was just wanted to work with people to help them transform. And I was quite elitist in the start of my career, because I wanted to work for football clubs, wanted to work with international athletes, which I did, and I enjoyed it. But there was just something about working with, Mary or Mike from the gym, or who wanted to transform their body and their life because they had kids or a job. It just really got me in the feels. I really wanted to do that. And I think because health was a big part of my own family, and like I'd lost my stepfather to cancer when I was 18, I kind of looked down at him and I was like, burpees ain't going to solve this. I remember like looking like fitness is great, but it's about a real holistic approach to health and personal health. So I created something called Fast Way to Fitness, which is a transformation business. We transform about 300 bodies a day. There's 300 people that go to the gym, and they do boot camps and nutrition and mindset. And that was the business I built as a boy. I built it as a boy. I look back now and I thought I was a man, but I was a boy building that business, and I learned so much. I used to sit for hours on end in a consultation room with clients, and they would come in and we'd talk about life and work and families and sex and all sorts of stuff. We never talked about food, and they'd get results. so it's like, so I didn't even know it was coaching then. I didn't even, I didn't have the badge. I'm a coach. I just say, hey, come in the consultation room, and I give people my time and not charge them for it for years, and just really did the work, and at the same time working on myself. I didn't like Ferraris or expensive cars. I didn't have a drug habit at the time. I just spent all the money on personal development. And what kind of happened, and this would kind of bring it into the self-sabotage in a second, but it was like I had an incredible arc of success, but I was just so not used to all that money coming in. I would come from a real poor family. We didn't have a lot. We had a lot of love, lots of love from my mother and my father, but I didn't have a lot of money. And I think I probably hit an upper limit, and I got married and divorced in a year. And then these things just started to fall apart. I was 29, 30, getting married and divorced. And what I noticed was that it was almost like the first time I really had to check in and say, do you know what, Ben, there's some work to do here. You can't carry on creating your life like this. There's something not right. Your incessant need to work. And I was a workaholic. I still love my work. I love what I did. You're a David, I imagine you're a purposeful guy as well. It's awesome. I love coaching people. I love helping, but it was just like, and one day I was in the shower, had my head up against the glass, and I just had this headache, and I just thought, something's wrong here. I need to stop. And I went on a men's retreat, and it's the first time I think I'd ever stopped. It was the first time I'd ever really stopped and meditated and done yoga, and I just realized there was a lot to work on, and that brought me to men's work. But at that same point, I didn't know how to work on myself. I was like doing personal development, which I would say like the transactional type of coaching, the transactional mentorship, where I was, working on time management and fitness and following plans. But I needed to make a big shift personally. And yeah, it was tough, right? It was like, I went through a really big struggle. I wasn't broken. I didn't have depression, and it's not a judgment of depression. It was just like, I didn't feel like depressed. I just felt like contracted and heavy. And then what happened was, I think I just realized that I liked men's work, and I went round trying to find men's groups, but I just found guys that weren't my tribe. They were great guys. I love hugging and taking, doing like different ceremonies and doing those, but it wasn't my group, and I didn't really resonate with some of the guys in the groups I went to, and I was looking and I couldn't find anything. So in the pandemic, I said to my new mentor at the time, Yazine, I was like, hey, listen, I'm thinking about getting back into coaching, because I took about 5 years away. And I said, I want to get back into coaching. And he said, well, if you want to go and get back into coaching, go coach, go and create conversations. And I did. And that kind of led me to this point today, where I lead a men's work group, like we do men's work. And I'm still in the trenches. I'm still working on myself alongside my men. I do the work every day, and I still coach clients. And yeah, that's what kind of my backstory is.
Wow. Quite many turns and twists in there as well. It's I've met a number of people, actually, number of men who started out in the fitness world, started out in the fitness world, and often, I imagine you saw this as well. It's like, it's not about, and you kind of alluded to it when you said, you talk about everything apart from food. Often I can remember the last person I spoke to, I think probably would have been Pat Divilly, and he was like, what he saw was it wasn't about, it wasn't about the. Yeah, great guy. I spent some time with him actually a couple of weeks ago at a workshop. It's not about the food and the exercise. It's about how people's minds are working. And that's the real thing that really shifts and changes things in our life. And it sounds like, you got to that point in your life where you kind of woke up and saw like, oh, I can't keep going on like this. There's something in this mind that's maybe not functioning in the way that I want. It's got me this far. Often we have some, I know one company calls them strong suits, or where our persona helps us get to so far, but it also has its limitations.
Yeah, it's funny you should say persona. It was like this mask, it was a mask. And a part of the retreat, and we did some shadow work. We actually wrote on a mask, all the things that we like people to see, and then all the things that we don't like people to see on the back. And I was like, holy shit. And one of the things I wrote on there was shit son. I was like, shit son. I was like, I identify that I've not been a great son. And my relationship with my father is nowhere near what I want it to be or it could be. And there was so much work to do around that. There was so much shame and there was so much pain. And my dad had been someone who had always, worked to build a relationship with me. But I had this feeling or narrative from my mum about my dad, because I'd lived with my mum. I was raised by my mum. That's why I was probably ended up trying to look for a group to say like how to be a good man, because I didn't have the father in the home. And I had this like invisible kind of block between me and my dad. I really wanted to connect with him, but there was a lot of resent there, but it'd come from my mum. And yeah, I was like, I remember doing that. So I was like, I need to work on my relationship with my dad. I need to slow down. And I also need to lead something. I need to lead a movement. And I was like, really, like, I know that I wasn't the only man who felt like this. You coach men as well, David, you'll know, it's like guys are in a lot of pain. And I was like, do you know what? I'm the kind of guy who can struggle in plain sight. And when we first decided to lead the men's work group, I was like, who the fuck am I to lead something called Awakened Man? Because I said to Yassine, I was like, I am not awakened. I am unawakened. I have got a porn habit. I've got, I drink too much. I don't drink, I wasn't like, I was like, maybe I drink more than I wanted to. I've got my relationship isn't exemplary. And he was like, that's exactly why you need to do it. And I can tell you, just from that point onwards, when we started the men's group, there's been like an exponential shift in my own personal life, because I've had to be congruent with what I talk about every single day. And I think, this is something as we go into the self-sabotage stuff, is like, this is a practice, it's not, when you hear guys who come on these podcasts and they espouse stuff they've read in a book and I just didn't want to be that guy. I just don't come from that place. If it doesn't work for me, I won't talk about it. I love research because I'm a scientist, but at the same time, I love pragmatic stuff that works for people as well. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey. But I think, I don't know about you, David, what's your opinion? But I think men's work is quite unattractive for men. It's quite, it's not for 90% of guys. The thought of going hugging another guy, being silent, taking yourself away, not drinking, sitting in circles, talking openly, all that sort of stuff, it's a repellent. And my belief, I believe my role in this movement is to make it a little bit sexy, bring it, make men's work great again. And that, the guys I've been speaking to, Pat DeVilly being one of them, he's talking, he's flying the flag, and yourself too, listen to your podcast, great stuff. And I'm like, yes, I think there's a small group of us men that are really starting to bring this into the light, which I'm loving. So I think I'm quite good at finding help, but I struggled when I was really hurting.
Yeah, I had a conversation with a guy a number of podcasts ago, Zach Alexander, I think his name is, and we were talking about this, why it's so unattractive, because, like you said there, to go away, and I'm thinking of the first men's work retreat I went on I went on Men Without Masks, and luckily for me at that time, I had done a silent meditation retreat like about a year before. So when the moment came to like hand over your phone, I remember looking at the other men's faces, and like so many of them were like, I haven't been without my phone for a day in like 10 years. And I was like, oh no, it's okay. Actually, it's really beautiful. I was like, here's my phone. I turned it off and I gave it to them. And I remember a couple of days in talking to one of the guys, and he was like, I handed my phone over, but I didn't turn it off. So my battery's going to be dead. And so when I need my phone, I get it back, I'm not going to be able to. It's like, we're so in this connectivity of using the phone and being connected that we don't even know what to do if we're going to like turn the phone off and hand it over. But I see, as you said there, doesn't feel attractive because it's like, what, you want me to hug a man and talk about my fears and my worries and the things I'm hiding? Like, why am I going to do that? Because we're so used to being in spaces of men where it's like, if we do those sorts of things, we're going to be attacked, we're going to be shamed, we're going to be ridiculed, we're going to be laughed at. And when you bring that kind of standard worldview into looking into a men's workspace, which, you know, I'm lucky, I've got friends who, I don't say lucky, but I've got friends who wouldn't touch men's work with a barge pole. So it's really, I get an interesting temperature gauge when I tell them about the things that I do. They're just like, Dave, that's fucking weird. Like you stood in front of a man and you talked about love. Like, dude, that's fucking weird. Why are you doing that? Or, you know, I've done some more, as we say, with some more outlandish retreats that were, you know, based around sexuality and the nudity and things like that. And they're like that's like, why would you do that? And it's really difficult to kind of entice those sorts of men in because they almost want to see, what's the return on my investment for this? Like, why am I going to do this? And
that's a good point. Yeah, I never thought about that. Yeah,
what's the return on my investment? And the way I kind of often put it to men is like, well, what's important to you in your life? Like, what's important? People used to go, my job or my partner, my children. It's like, well, you know, the relationship your parents have, do you want that relationship? And they're like, fuck no. You're like, okay, so this will help you not have that relationship. And they're like, well, I'm not going to because I'm not my parent. I was like, yeah, but there's all this unconscious shit that you're doing already that you're not aware of. And this is going to help you become aware of that. And it's like, why do you think it's weird to talk about love? Like, maybe you might want to look at that. Like, and they might say, oh, but everyone thinks it's weird. And it's like, well, no, they don't actually. That's you and maybe but wouldn't you want to get over that? Isn't there some things that you're doing in your life that maybe you want to stop doing? Like, maybe you do want to cut down your drinking. Like, why do you drink so much? Like, why do you smoke so much weed? And I kind of talk to some of my friends in that way. And some of them are still, they wouldn't touch a barge pole. But a few of my friends have definitely been like, oh shit, yeah. And it also is the example, like you were saying, it's like, it's not about, you know, reading some books, and we can read these wonderful books by David Data and these wonderful people, and you can like say all the things, but like embodying the learnings and doing the practices, like, you know, you can tell people to meditate, you know, and I've told many people like meditation, I give it to my clients often, but it's like, why do I meditate? Because I'm able to sit and be really grounded and present in the moments that really matter, especially with my partner when there's difficult moments. And it's like, because it's not about knowledge. You know, as men, sometimes we just gather knowledge. It's not about the knowledge. It's the embodiment of the knowledge. It's like living the information that we've gathered so that we're in real time, we're still learning because we're taking feedback from the world. And I think that's something that is often hard to kind of explain and transmit when we're in kind of men's spaces, or we're talking to men who are maybe tentative about stepping into those spaces.
Yeah. And I think, a men's work and is the self-development for men. Like, this is what I believe. And I did that. I went around every business course. I went around I spent multi six figures on personal development. Like, I'm happy to admit that I really, really invested heavily in myself with marketing coaches, business coaches, but I was creating the action from a space of a victimhood. I was a victim to my circumstance. You know, I was really not owning my life. There was all sorts of struggles and challenges. I wasn't really taking 100% responsibility, and I hadn't become a man. You know, I was treating it like a boy. I was waiting to be rescued, all sorts of things. And a large part of that was because I didn't have the relationship with my father. I hadn't really come to terms with some of my addictive behaviors and some of my numbing behaviors. And equally, every time I had a bit of success, I'd run a pattern which was similar to that of my mother. You know, as soon as money comes in, it has to go out. And it was just like, so this was all going on. And I think that this is what kind of brought me to, it was tools work actually, you know. So I just kind of give you a background. One day I was trying to work out whether to become a psychotherapist or a coach. And I said to my mentor, you've seen, I was like, well, what should I do? And I was like, thinking of PhD for psychotherapy. And he was like, have you read The Tools? And I was like, no. So I read this book called The Tools, and it's these psychotherapeutic tools which help people reclaim the space to make a conscious decision in the moment. Now, and like, if you've read Man's Search for Meaning, I imagine you're a man, you're in doing some work, you might have read that book about Viktor Frankl, and he said in any given moment, man's final freedom is the ability to choose one's own attitude. And it's like that tiny little space between stimulus and response. Like your partner says something, you react. But when you become more conscious, when you start doing meditation, like David said before, when you start slowing down, when you start creating your world, you start to realize there's a small space between anything in your environment and what you do next. There's a decision space, a choice point. And what these tools do is they allow you to reclaim your state in that space. And when I first read it, it seemed a bit abstract for me because I was a coach who came from a science background, and I was like, I want some kind of real, tangible stuff here. I want to see some science, but it was very right brain, abstract, wonky, woo-woo, in my opinion. But there was something that really resonated. There was something that really resonated, and I was like, okay. So I messaged the authors. I messaged Phil Stutz, and I didn't get a reply, but I got a reply from his co-author, a guy called Barry Michaels. And Barry's clients, the likes of Gwyneth Paltrow, Jay-Z, Joaquin Phoenix, all those kind of people. And he said, hey, listen, I'm open to coming to do a session. And I was like, holy shit, this is awesome. This is like, he's like a movie star for me. And he came into our group, and we only had like 10, 15 guys at the time. And he came in and he had this aura about him. This guy had the real aura. And I thought he was going to go through some tools. And the first thing he did is he explained this concept to me, which I want to share with you, the listeners, called Part X. And I'd never heard of this. I never had heard about Part X. And I was like, well, Part X is this part of you that is there to fuck you up. It's there to stop you from moving forwards in your life. And I was like, I resonate with that. It makes sense. I can see where I've stopped myself from moving forwards. And I didn't see it as much of an issue. Like at the time, I was like, I didn't see self-sabotage as an issue for me. And I even said to Yassine, I was like, I don't self-sabotage. I've created some amazing success. And he goes, no, Ben, you self-sabotage. You do. In moments where you need to pay attention to detail, that's when you speed up and you make mistakes at critical points. And I was like, well, yeah, I do. And then as I started to learn more about Part X, I realized that I was pretty much creating about 80% of my life from this part. And really getting to know Part X, and this is what I want to give to you if you're listening to this podcast, is like how to just see this part of you that is fucking your life up, and to be able to label it and spot it. And you have to stop me because I can get on a roll here, David, and but because it's so passionate about it, because it helped me so much. I was this seemingly successful guy that on the surface had everything together, but behind the scenes I would just make stuff, and things would happen, or I'd behave in a certain way or think a certain way that was just sabotaging me moving forwards. So the way this got explained to me, which made perfect sense from science, so I was like, give me the science, was this idea that there's Newton's third law is every force has an equal and opposing force. And say you're a man, and say you're a professional man or a professional woman listening to this, and you've got this huge force for growth inside you. Like David's, how many podcast episodes have you done?
Almost 200, I think.
So, this guy is a force. You're a force for change. Like, this is why you've got so many men following you. You've got this huge force for growth. Now, in the laws of the universe, the universal law, every force has an equal and opposing force. So David's force for growth is going to be met by an equal force opposing him to grow, which is his Part X. Now I was like, that makes sense. that makes sense for the first time. I was like, okay. And our job as men and women is to bring our whole selves to that fight every single day. Because it is a fight every single day. Every single day is a fight to overcome that part of you that's trying to hold you back, because that part of you is trying to keep tomorrow the same as today, so then I can live. That's the whole point. That's the whole point of the brain. If you think about that, it's like, if I can make tomorrow the same as today, it's more likely I'm going to live. And yeah, that made so much sense. And so just want to give you a break there, guys. But any questions, David? So this was like, for me, that was mind blowing.
I've never heard it explained. This is the way that many people explain kind of, this sounds like part of the ego, the part of us that wants to keep us safe, that wants to keep everything on routine and repetition. Because, if we've done it before, then it's safe, we can do it again. Even if what we've done before is harmful and hurtful to us, keep it in place, because at least we know the harm and the hurt. We're used to it. We're accustomed to it. So it's but the part you said there about the equal and opposing force, like as you were saying, like, yeah, it makes sense. It's like, well, yeah, I was thinking about it in my own life, and I was like, okay, yes, there's like this part of me that wants to grow and wants to be better and blah, blah, blah. But there's equally this part of me that's like in the moment. And I love how you explained it, the space, because I often describe this to my clients, actually. I usually literally use my hands to explain. It's like, there's a thing that happens. There's a stimuli, and then that's your response, and that's called reactivity. And what we want to do is we want to create a little bit of space so that you can pause, because that's worth £1 million right there. That space there, when you develop a big enough space, that's the difference between happiness and a happy life and a miserable life. Because when we, we can basically, in my opinion, it's like, if we can start having conscious choice, instead of reacting from our kind of habitual patterns, we start to use this massive brain, all this information that we gather to make a choice in the moment. But I love what you said there about the opposing force, because it's like, well, yeah, and I look at my own life and go, yeah, I'm this force for change and wanting to create. But there's equally this part of me that's constantly like, you're not good enough. What you're doing isn't good enough. Like, everyone else is more successful than you. And it's incessant and it's very strong. And I have to bring my whole self, like you said, like each day on my yoga mat, if I'm meditating or if I'm journaling, I bring myself to that. And I wouldn't say fight against it, because I don't think maybe that's how I tackled it many years ago. But I bring a level of, say, compassion and understanding and even conversation to like, as you described it, it's part X. It's like, oh, you're scared of newness. You're scared of the unknown. It's okay, because look, we've done this. We've got through difficult times before, but that same force catches me. If I'm tired, if I'm feeling particularly emotional for whatever reason, I'm stretched, whatever, that's when that space starts to get diminished and that part X starts to get more influential in my tiny momentary decisions. It's the small decisions often. It's not the kind of huge life decisions. It's the little decision of, say, I don't know, I've met someone I really like and I want to stay connected to them, whether this is a dating sense or just like a man you've met. And it's that little moment where you go, I message them later, and I message them later, and I message them later, and you never message them. And those little moments there, you'd look back and go, I never got round to messaging them. But there's part of your reaction to them was like, either you didn't think they would want to talk to you, or you wouldn't be good enough for their company. And that's what had you leave it instead of taking action in that moment. And those little moments, they often stack up to like lots of big life-changing events because of the little moments the little decisions we've made continually along the way.
Yeah, I love that. You've nailed it. That's like in different. When I learned about this, actually, like I was like, right, okay, part X. Okay, well, is it just these guys, these therapists' narrative? Like, is it a science-based thing? And I so I went to all the books and then what I saw was shades of the same conversation, the same story, the same thing going through. Like the Bible calls it the devil, diabolos. You've got the upper limit problem in what's his name's book, The Big Leap. Gay Hendricks calls it the upper limit behaviors. Then you've got the Steve Peters calls it the chimp. I think it's the chimp. And what I saw in all these books was the same conversation. Stephen Pressfield calls it resistance. So it was the same thing coming up in all these different books, but in different, talking about it differently. And what David said there was so important. It doesn't do it in big, bombastic ways. It's tiny little things that get and go under the radar. Now, this is what happens. I sit down to do some really creative work. I sit down and I'm like, okay, I'm currently writing a curriculum. And all of a sudden, I get this massive urge to procrastinate. So my phone which is here now. It's on I have to put my phone way out of my way because I get this overwhelming urge to scroll. And I'm like, I know that this work that's in front of me, when it's completed, it's going to move my life forward. It's so valuable. It's my life's work. Yeah, I'm finding this overwhelming urge to procrastinate. Now, there are a couple of ways which you can spot part X. So I'll go through a couple of them. The first one is this overwhelming victim narrative. It's a victim narrative that is so powerful. It totally knocks you off your feet. This is like where you are confusing a knockback with a complete knockout. So, for example, on a sales call, as David mentioned before, in a dating situation, a little setback is a complete knockout. It's like a total overcalibration. And that's I was like, yeah, that's part X at its best. And it's that you absolutely confuse those two. And another one is powerful primitive urges. And for men, this is jerking off. Like jerking off, it can be go and smoke weed. It's like, it can be powerful drives to go and eat. And it's almost like you sit down and then the only thing that you can think about doing is going watching pornography. It's like, it's in your mind, it's clouding your mind. And you've been flooded with these thoughts of, but hey Ben, you got to go and jerk off. And I was there, I was like, I didn't have a porn problem to speak, like to say I was like watching it like 4 times a day every day, but in my most creative moments, I would be like, oh yeah, do you know what? I'm just going to go. And what happens is you go and do that, then you go and eat, then you go, and then you've wasted an hour. And so there was loads of these micro behaviors going under the radar, and this is the thing about self-sabotage, that people think that it's these massive, sweeping, huge things that you do that actually stop you from moving forwards. But moment to moment, what all it's doing, it's taking your attention away from growth and it's taking it to safety. And I was like, oh my God, this is me. I can see this happening. And what I realized is that if I wanted to overcome this part of me, first of all, I had to understand what it was. This is why I'm sharing this with you today, is that you've got to know your enemy. You've got to know how it behaves, how it works against you. And there's like 8 ways, there's 8 key ways. We're not going to go through all of them because they're exhaustive, but it's starting to spot it and label it, going, you motherfucker, you got me. So, one of my favorite ones is that I'll be, say for example, I'm going to come in and do work at 7:00 at night. I've come here to do the podcast tonight, and it's 6:00 or 6:30. I'm doing the dishes, and I start thinking about David, and I've got this thing about David in my head, and I start creating this narrative around him and creating a load of hate and resent. And then all of a sudden, my state has been taken from me to go and have a good conversation with David, or a client that I've got, or my boss that I'm going to be interacting with at the end of the day. And so what happens is that part X will flood you with this narrative that you react to. And whilst you're reacting to that, you're not in a creative state. You're not in a place that you're going to move forwards. And it's so clever. And I was like, shit, this is me. This is me and this is my clients. And I was like, okay, how'd you fight that? And so that was kind of the next part. Do you want to share anything before I get into that, David? Because I can get, really on a roll about this, and I don't want to, yeah.
No, it's interesting. It's like how the kind of two, we said, the small ways, because I often relate things back to kind of dating and relationships, because this is where I spend a lot of my time with people. And I was on the phone to a woman that I coach before this, and we were talking about how serious she is in her dating life, right? And I was like, do you realize that when you show up in this seriousness all the time, like what does that create? And she was like, oh, I think it creates like quite a tension on the dates. But before that, we kind of got to that. She was like, I don't know why these dates don't go this way. It must be the men that I'm meeting. There must be something wrong with them, blah, blah, blah. And then when we dived into it, we saw that there was this seriousness that she was bringing all the time. And I was like, for you, it feels heavy. We got to the point, she was like, yeah, it feels really heavy for me. I'm on dates. The texting feels heavy. And I was like, how does it feel for the other person? And it was like a moment where she was like, oh, I've never thought about that. I was like, they can feel it, right? And it's kind of what you're saying. It's like these little things that we do that push the things we really want away from us. That could be the business opportunity. That could be the client. That could be our partner. That could be just a happy life, because we just keep making these little decisions based on, part X and its story and its narrative and its fear and its emotions. And it just veers us off course. It's like, I guess it's the death by 1,000 cuts in many ways, right? And it's very easy for us to look and blame outwardly and go, oh, these people did this to me, or they didn't treat me right. But we don't see these tiny, tiny little things that we do constantly. And I love what you were saying there about the primal urges, because I was thinking of myself, what distracts me most of all is like food. Often I'm like sitting here and I want to do some creative work, and I'm like, I'm hungry. I want to eat something. And it's like these little bits of kind of, I'll call it kind of like discipline, right? Because that takes 5 minutes. It takes us out that creative flow. It takes us, so we don't do that work. And then there's a knock-on effect, or the self-sabotage can turn up as like going to bed late, right? I have this thing with a lot of my clients now, and I'm like, okay, what's your sleeping like? And they're like, Dave, we want to talk about dating and my relationship. And I'm like, yeah, but what's your sleep like? And they're like, why does sleep matter? I was like, because when you're underslept, you're under-resourced. And when you're under-resourced, you make bad decisions and choices. It's like if you drink alcohol and you don't sleep well, you're guaranteed that you're going to be making bad decisions around that time. And it's like we end up in these kind of primal urges when we're under-resourced. And I see that, like, for me, it's food. I've never really I've had a very, I'd say, a healthy-ish relationship with porn, especially in the last kind of 5 or 10 years. But this kind of hijacks us. This little voice comes into our head and goes, oh, don't do that. Do this thing that's going to be much more fun and interesting instead of this boring creative work. But when really our purpose is and what we want to do is this work that's going to like really move us forward, or our relationship, whatever it is. And for a lot of people, they see that this is who they are. They don't see that there's a way to change this. They're like, oh, well, this is how I am. I can't do anything about it. I just have to kind of do the best I can within those parameters. But, I know from my work, and as well, it's like we can change this, for our, decisions and choices and the way that we show up for ourselves. And I know you're going to talk more about that, which I'm also super interested in hearing. Like, how do we kind of get out of this self-sabotage, this being hijacked by part X and its emotions and its stories and its narratives?
Yeah, good question. And it's a fight. And like to say what you said, I used to fight. For me, it was a fight, and it is a fight. I realized, and I could see it when it was pointed out to me, that this part of me, part X, resistance. I'm, the thing about me is I'm not attached to it being called part X or resistance or you chimp or whatever. It's just like there was this part of me that was resisting and winning. And I was doing some stupid shit, really stupid shit that just had no, the biggest impact it had is right at the moments where I could have moved forward, it would shut me down. Now, this is actually where a big light bulb for me, it was that where is part X, or where is the resistance most likely to show up? And it's in moments of risk in the soul, risking your you think about dating, you think about your fitness, you think about creative experiences that you're about to go and create in the world. All before those things, during those things, and after those things, creative endeavors, that's the one. Creative endeavors. Before it, I've got resistance to doing it. During it, I'm like second guessing. And after it, I'm like, what did I do? And the way this was explained was like, in the morning, and you're thinking like, oh, David, should I get up this morning? It's all warm in the sheets. And there is a voice that comes to you saying, oh, David, you worked hard yesterday, man. You just chill. You enjoy the nice warm sheets, and you can do it tomorrow. You'll be fine. And like that voice is a voice for me. I've heard it many times, and I fought it every day. And when I don't get up, or when you don't get up, and I don't know, listeners, if you don't get up, the same voice goes to you, you fucking lazy piece of shit. I can't believe you missed your morning workout. Yeah. And that's the work. That's the work of the part of you that's there, and it's the part of you that you believes like your ally, but it's the same part of you in deep down in your gut you shouldn't listen to, whether that's watching porn, whether that's eating too many cookies, and you've got to be aware of that. So the first thing that we want to do is label part X, like label it. It's like, I see you, and that's the first step. And like the 2 R's, rage and ridicule. So this is something that I didn't expect, because I was like, okay, now I understand, I can see it. Primitive primal urges, victim narrative, lack of energy. That's another way it shows up. It's like, you look at your calendar in the day. I don't know if you have this, David. I was like, sometimes I look at my calendar and I've got 10 appointments, and I'm like, oh my God, I feel so overwhelmed. And I know I'm going to get through it because I got through it last week. But then it convinces me I haven't got enough energy. And so what happens is when you start labeling that part of you, it's like, yeah, I can see you. This is it. Okay, this happens there. You can do that with a coach. Someone like David, someone like, a great coach will help you label these self-sabotaging behaviors. And then what you start to realize is how much of your day is being governed by this part of you that's messing with your life. And that was for me really quite hard to deal with. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't think I did this. And then all of a sudden I was like, right, okay, this is my work. This is what I needed to do. I needed to fight my inner enemy. So there's a war going on the inside. And it wasn't that the war means I've got to be angry, or I've got to be nasty to myself, or there needs to be hatred. That it isn't. It means that every single day I get up and I'm at day 0. Just because I fought it yesterday, it doesn't mean it's going to be any easier today. And I think that's something that I went through in my early parts of my self-development. I don't know if you could agree with this, David, as well. When I was in my 20s, I thought if I did enough personal development, if I was a good enough man, if I did good enough things, I worked hard, eventually one day it would be all unicorns, orgasms, and rainbows. I would be like free from struggle. And I maybe juvenile. Maybe I thought I could transcend struggle. But as Phil Stutt says, that there's 3 constants in life: pain, suffering, and constant work. So they're 3 constants. I know I'm going to have them. So I get up every day. I'm going to fight the good fight. I'm going to fight that part of me that's holding me back, bring my whole self. And I'm going to use rage and ridicule. And rage is where you see that part that's trying to hold you back, and you speak to it. You say, listen, fuck off, man. It sounds really over simple, maybe. Like, you just see this part of you that's and the other part is ridicule. It's like, you got me. Like when you go and play pool with a buddy and he snookers you, you're like, you always turn to him and you're like, fuck, man, you got me. You snookered me. And that's the relationship I've built with my part X. Like, man, I've just had my phone in my hand for 5 minutes and I'll check my phone right across the room and I'll get back on. And I've built this relationship with this inner enemy, which allows me to move through it, because it ain't going. I'm not. You can't kill it. People and my clients say, okay, I want to kill part X. I'm like, sorry, it didn't happen. Actually, what happens is, if we look at the original comment, the bigger the force of growth. So the more you grow, the more it grows. It's your eternal sparring partner. And you actually need it for that inner growth. And for me, that was like, oh shit. So what? So as I get more competent as a man, as I get more conscious as a man, as I do more things in the world, I'm going to have to put up with this part of me that's going to be equally as venomous, strong, powerful. Yep, absolutely, because that's how it works. And I was like, it's kind of bittersweet knowing that. And so for me, that was like, right, okay. Just because it's an everyday thing, it doesn't mean it's futile. It doesn't mean that it's not a worthwhile fight every single day. And yeah, that's kind of like where I wanted to bring it to, really, because there are ways you can fight this. They're the tools. If you read the tools book, there's simple things that you can do to move into the pain that you're trying to avoid. And I think 90 or 80% of the self-sabotage stuff gets better when you learn to label it as, yep, that's resistance, that's self-sabotage, that's the devil's work, whatever you want to call it. And for me, and I've seen it for clients, this is revolutionary as well. It's like really accepting that part of the self as there and resistant, and being able to work against it and get stronger. So yeah, that's kind of like a kind of self-sabotage 101 for me.
So I have another program coming up in September, 12-week program this time, because I see a lot of men desiring to show up in their lives with more leadership, more expression, more connection, more depth, more openness. So I have my program, Being an Authentic Masculine Man. And in this program, really, I help men cultivate the depth they want, the deep presence and self-awareness that they haven't been able to find on their own, to really express themselves more openly and more honestly. Through the program, men have really shed a lot of shame, been able to show up powerfully in their relationships, been able to express themselves and feel confident in their dating lives, and really let go of a lot of sexual shame as well. And this is just the content, right? Like I said, the men that have been on the program in the past, they've come back and said it's completely changed their lives. It's helped them build new relationships and friendships with depth and with honesty, of openness that they never thought was possible. So if you're interested in this program, which is going to be starting in September for 12 weeks, go into the show notes and you can find all the details to sign up, and we'll have a conversation about how you can jump on. And I've often used many words for this, but I love the way Part X is just very contained. It's almost like I describe it to my clients. It's a bit like video games, You probably grew up with Mario and Zelda and stuff like that, where you would like be on the level, you get the end, there's a boss there, you got to beat the boss. And it's like, but each level, every time you beat the boss and you move to the next level, the boss is stronger. The weapons, you need more weapons, you need more grit, you need more cunning. And it's kind of like that as you're describing. It's like, as we grow, the thing we come up against is going to have an equal force to us, because ultimately we're kind of stretching our comfort zone that becomes kind of the Part X isn't necessarily need to be operating anymore, because we've become comfortable. We've kind of tackled those parts, and we're into newer territory, which is bigger for us, that's more meaningful, that's like more impactful. So the voice that's in our head is going to come with equal force, because it's going to be pushing against us, trying to get us back into that comfort zone. And as you said, it's like a daily practice. It's a daily fight that we take, to ourselves. Often people talk about the kind of world being like a fight and a battle. And I've often said to people, it's like the real battle just goes on in your mind. That's where the real battle for any man is happening, inside his own mind. And I remember there's a song by East Forest, John Hopkins and Ram Dass. I think it's called Sing Around the Fire. And in it, Ram Dass says, he's like, the real battle is going on in your own heart, about finding that inner connectivity of yourself. And I listened to it recently. I was driving, and it really is like, the more and more that I do this work, this coaching work, it's like we have an outward experience of our world because we have eyes and our senses are kind of more outwardly focused. But so much of that world is really just influenced by how we're dealing with our inner world, how we're dealing with this kind of reactivity to the small things. Like, my phone is there. Like, okay, there's that almost like you can feel it if you become quite sensitive. I was recently did a 10-day silent meditation retreat, and I had a really interesting experience when I went into a supermarket the next day. I was walking down one of the aisles, and on one side of the aisles was sweets. And imagine, I haven't had any sweets for like 10 days. It's all been like, lovely home cooked food. And I could literally feel one side of my body, like the sensation in that side of the body just got heightened, almost like it was pulling me towards the sweets. And I was walking down this aisle in the supermarket, and I was like, wow, it's not just my mind is trying to get me there. There's sensations in my body that are calling me towards the sweets. And I was like, in this moment, I've just come off 10 days of meditation, I'm really aware of my body's sensations, right? I was like, but most people are nowhere near this aware of what's going on. So when they're in the aisle for the sweets, that part of them just pulls them over to the sweets. And sometimes they unconsciously grab something from there, throw it in the basket, and then before they know it, they're at the till when they've paid for it, and they're like, oh, I didn't want to have sweets. I've been telling myself that I wouldn't have any sweets or anything like that. But it's so powerful and happens so subconsciously to us if we're not aware. It's just like there's this part of you that is just trying to be safe and do all the things it's known. And we got to label it. We got to look at it, and we've got to I love the two things there, rage and ridicule, because I'm a bit like you. Sometimes I find myself like opening the fridge door and I'm like, why the fuck am I in the fridge? I just ate like 10 minutes ago. Why am I in the fridge? And I'm like, you bastard, you got me here, didn't you? You got me here.
Yeah.
Or I'll come back to my laptop and I'll be like, I'm doing some work, and then somehow I find myself in a different tab, and I'm trying to catch myself more and more, like the hand movement towards doing something, like the hand movement towards the phone. Like, no, I'm not going there. I know, I can see you've tried. But why the battle is so important is because every time the urge comes, we have a choice. And the more we practice the muscle of conscious choice over kind of habitual action, we strengthen ourselves. That's been my experience. That's what I love about meditation as well, because if you sit and meditate on a cushion for 20 minutes, half an hour, there's going to be multiple times where you sit and your mind goes, just stand up, just stop this. Let's just go for a walk or do something else. And that's the work, isn't it? That's the work, is to not become aware of and maybe to label the kind of urge, but also to label it in time that you can see it occurring, you can see it arise, or you can see it start to move you, and then choose to do something else, because that's when we start to become real kind of masters of ourselves, to be honest.
Yeah, I love this this thinking that confidence is actually self-restraint. The true route to confidence is self-restraint. And I never heard this until my mid-30s. I was, thought confidence would be like something to do with courage, where you take a risk. And I was thinking about this when it was presented. It was like, confidence is just self-restraint. The real confidence is self-restraint. And I was like, okay, how does that work? And if you look at the root word for confidence, it's confidere, which is intense trust. In any given moment, I trust myself to make the right choice. And if you really look at what people are looking for when they say, I want to be confident, I want to be, I was like, I trust myself. I can make the hard choice. I can make the right choice. I can back myself. The confidence is what they're looking for, is that intense trust in themselves. The route to intense trust is self-restraint. And if I expose myself to enough things where I have to restrain myself, and this is what I really found helpful, because most people, when confronted with deprivation, for example, so like you talk about going to the fridge and not having the food or not checking your phone, that's deprivation. So most unconscious people believe deprivation is the route to death. Depriving myself of that thing is going to be the route to death, and it's actually the route to life. Think about this. You've been on a silent meditation. I bet you haven't felt so alive in your body.
Yeah.
When people deprive themselves of food for like 3 days, 2 days on a fast, they're like, oh my God, I've got so much energy. I feel, obviously chronic deprivation is not good. Please don't skew my comments here, T. But like, deprivation is the path to life. And And that concept set me free. Really practicing self-restraint, depriving myself of that thing that I often want on the other end of an impulse is been so amazing. It's changed my relationship. It's changed my eating habits. They didn't need much of a change anyway, but I've lost weight. I'm not as reactive. And ultimately, if you want to be confident, it starts with that intense trust that you can, restrain yourself against the right or wrong decision in that moment. It's to do with self-sabotage as well, because you're choosing the better choice. So yeah, there's a lot of things that come back to this self-sabotage. So hopefully you found that helpful, David, and guys that you were listening in as well, because I think this is something that when you have the narrative, when you have the language, when you have the what's the word called, the landscape, when you understand it, you're like, yeah, I can really see this. And that's when the battle's a bit more fair, because up until now, if you haven't heard this, you've been fighting against the real unknown enemy.
And I was really interested what you said about confidence there being about self-restraint, because I've been talking to a few men about confidence recently, and when I talk to them about it, they always refer to like, oh, when I was really young, I was so confident. And when we kind of dive into it, I had maybe 3 of these conversations in a week about a month ago. And when we dug into it, actually what they associated confidence with, which was like carefreeness and fearlessness. And when we started to talk about it, we were like, actually, so what you were actually doing there was like, you were taking action and not caring about anyone. You weren't caring about yourself. You weren't caring about other people. And I was like, well, is that actually what you want now? And a lot of them were like, not really actually, because I could see where I actually hurt myself a lot in the past, or I hurt other people. I was insensitive and so forth. And now they're a bit older and maybe we're doing some work together, get more empathy. They're like, I want to be, they kind of associated confidence with, like you said, making good choices. And that's what it came down to, is like having the knowledge and the inclination and intuition to make good choices in the moment. And that came, and it was like 3 different people, and the conversation went the same way with each of them. Is like, actually, I just want to make good choices for the moment. I don't want to be completely fearless and carefree, because actually in the past, I think it was confidence, but really it led me to some really dangerous situations and harmful situations. So I love the self-restraint, because often I see with men, and you must see this, is that they want freedom. They're like, I want to be free to do whatever, and I want to have no constraints. But in itself, I keep talking to people about this as well. It's like when you create a life where you're completely free, which I've done at least a couple of times in my life for long periods of time, you are then constrained by the fact that you feel you have to you have so much choice, and that can be paralyzing in and of itself. And then you lose the freedom you suspect you have anyway. But actually, by making choices like being in a committed relationship or making a choice to go all in on the business, you draw a line in the sand around you, and then you can fully go deep into the area that you've kind of set for yourself. Whereas when you have no boundaries, you can't really go deep into anything. You can't really commit yourself to anything, because as soon as you commit, you draw a line in the sand. And it's this idea that I love what you said there about confidence being about self-restraint, like holding yourself back from things. And then I'm kind of adding on to it. It's like that when we draw a line around ourselves, we allow ourselves to go deep into something and really experience the essence, the goodness, the multifaceted nature of that experience and that constraint that we've created.
Yeah, it was actually something I learned really early on in my men's work, was like Abraham Maslow's stuff. Like Maslow was famous for the hierarchy of needs and all that sort of stuff, but then he not as famous for his other theory, which was what I'll call like the +1 -1 theory. It's like, it's not what he called it. In any given moment, we've got a choice. We can choose growth or comfort. We choose the +1 decision to move towards growth. So David invites me to come and do a podcast. I'm slightly scared. I'm like, I'm interviewed by David. Do you know what? I'll make a comfortable decision. I'll push it off into the future. Let's do it maybe like next January. And that's that comfortable decision. And this is what a lot of people do. They think they're making comfortable decision after comfortable decision. Like roll over in the morning and go back to the duvet, go to the fridge. Well, God, just watch pornography this once. Just watch it this once. And what happens is that we think we're making a -1 decision, or just this once is just that one -1. But what we've been doing either on a weekly basis is we've been making -1 decision after -1 every time we made a comfort decision. And we're not moving towards comfort. That's why most people get fucked up on a Friday, because they start at, they're kind of 0 on the Monday, and they make comfortable decision after decision. And by Friday, they're not comfortable. They're -5. They're this, psychopathological state, anxiety, depression, frustration, suicidal ideation. And that is what most people experience day to day, moment to moment, is that they're constantly making a comfortable decision, and they then have to numb. Whereas true confidence, true discipline, expansive discipline is in the moment, like David talked about before. That I love that explanation, is that they've created this space for themselves, be it with consciousness, with tools, meditation, whatever, where they say, actually, do you know what, the hard decision here is to have that hard conversation. The hard decision here is to be honest about how I'm feeling. The hard, and that, despite it being painful in the moment, you turn around on a Friday when you've done some hard shit all week, you feel great. You feel good. You feel, it might have been a hard week, but you feel good. So it's this idea that, pain is the route to growth. We know that from the gym. We know that's like, eating pain. So I just, that has been a concept that I've been really kind of embodying at the moment. It's like, that's where I'm at. Like, oh yeah, it's a bit of pain involved here. Yeah, come on then, let's go for it. Not sadomasochism, can't ever say it. Not inflicting pain on me or on others. It's like, oh, is there going to be some discomfort here? Let's get in there, rub the hands, off we go. So yeah.
Leaning into pain, yeah. Because as you said, it's just like that -1 is not. It's not just -1. It's just like, and for a lot of people, that's week after week, month after month, minus comfort. And, I kind of mentioned it before, is like the comfort zone starts to shrink and get smaller and smaller. And I imagine you've seen this with clients. Like I've seen this with a few men where their lives, they can chart over a period of like maybe 3 or 4 years, where their life has got smaller. They speak to less people. They go to less places. They do less and less. And before they know it, their life is incredibly small, and they're making exactly the same decisions and choices. And they're just in this unhappiness. They're in the anxiety, the fear, the worry, and constant. And it's because their lives have become so small. Their comfort zones have become so tiny.
Yeah, I've been there. I was there. So, yeah, and it's been quite a journey, but I do feel that I'm not alone. Like, if you're a guy listening to this and you experiencing that, I think it's well worth just starting to do that work, like labeling part X, looking at where you want more confidence, intense trust. And I think it's been a process. It's it's not been an overnight thing. It's not a magic pill. But at the same time, in 2 years, I'm so much better at managing my mind and my emotions and my state. It's like a night and day.
And it's truly like life-changing work. And I say this, we're going to say this because we're coaches, but it really is. It transforms a life that feels kind of half-lived, existing, into a life of joy and adventure and creativity, in terms of not necessarily like artistry, but creating the life that we want. And it isn't just for other people. It can be for you as well. And it's just making these different choices and decisions on a hourly, daily basis. They're actually, in a way, very small and easy decisions to make, in a way, because they're very, they're very tiny, but they can have a real what's the word I'm looking for? Compound effect across our lives.
Yeah. Man.
So, listeners, this has been a real treat. It's a topic of self-sabotage that, has been really close to my heart the last few years, because I've started to see more and more. It's like, it's not I used to believe it was the big stuff, like the big choices, the big decisions that would make my life. And I started to see for myself, like, you know, these small things. It's like, oh, that's where my course went and it went that way. Or relationships was how I saw it. That's where my relationships start to go south because I didn't say that thing and I didn't bring up that conversation and I didn't stand up in that conflict and so forth. And then you're like, whoop, break up 4 years later. So really grateful, Ben, for bringing this, because this part about part X and also the confidence has been beautiful wisdom for me, and I'm sure the listeners as well. And I'm sure the listeners are wondering where they can hear more from you, from your wisdom, work with you as well.
Yeah, man. I created something just purely creative endeavor. I wanted to make something that would be listened to so guys could really get to know this work, and it's called innerenemy.com. It's a 7-part audio series, and it's just about part X, just about like how to overcome your inner enemy. So www.innerenemy.com and download it. It's free. It'll always be free. It's something that's just something helpful. I really enjoyed the podcast side of it. We just did it over a podcast because you're listening to this, you listen to podcasts. So innerenemy.com. And then equally, I just hang out on Instagram nowadays. It's like at Coach Benjamin Owen, and just, I don't post that frequently, but at the same time, I share about my life and my work, and I enjoy doing that. And I'm one of these people that if you write to me, I write back. So I'll follow you back and all that sort of stuff, because I really do enjoy a good conversation and helping men and women massively transform their life. That's what I'm enormously passionate about.
Awesome. And those details are going to be in the show notes. If you just pop down there, you'll be able to find the links to both of those. So yeah, Ben, thank you, man. Thank you for the wisdom tonight. Like, even I'm like, I've taken some notes. I've enjoyed this so much, man. Thank you for your time, your energy, and just the work, just how it comes through. I can feel the transmission of all the work that you've done to really understand this little part of you that's trying to get in your way.
Oh, thank you, man. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you, David.
And listeners, if you've enjoyed today's episode and you've learned something from the episode, I'm sure that both of us would love to hear from you. Maybe you have some realizations about how your part X self-sabotages you, or the particular behavior that you have that you've noticed from this conversation that, like, this is what veers me off course, and this is what takes me out, and this is what distracts me. Like, myself and Benjamin would love to hear from you what that is, and maybe, some strategies that you are putting into play to get past that. But that's it for today. I'd like to say thank you and ciao, ciao. I want to say a big thank you for listening. It's people like yourself that really help get the podcast out into the world. Especially if you're often sharing the episodes and the podcast with people that you feel just could do with listening, right? Can see a different way of being a man, maybe a different way of having dating lives and intimacy and relationships. So I want to say a big thank you. And if maybe after listening to this episode, you think, there's someone actually who could really do with this, please share it with them. Share the love. I'm really, really grateful. And if you want to get in contact with me for any questions, or you want to talk about coaching or any working together, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at @theauthenticman_, or you can email me hello@theauthenticman.net. Thank you very much.